Welcome Myers friends and family. My name is Angela and today I'm going to talk to you about the Flare and the Vesta embroidery machines. They're both sister machines. They have very similar capabilities. The Flare itself is an embroidery only, where the Vesta is a combination of embroidery and sewing. So I'm going to talk to you about the accessories that are included with the Flare in the Vesta. I'm going to do the sewing portion with the Vesta since it's the only one that has sewing capabilities, and then later on we'll move to the Flare and I'll show you the embroidery. So you have the unit itself that'll look very similar between the Vesta and the Flare. The only thing visually that you're really going to notice is that the Flare will not have the feed dogs on the machine. So you will have both machines include the embroidery arm, which we'll be using later when we go to do embroidery, so you can pull that off. The Vesta will come with the accessories arm, and with it it'll have several accessories. So you have a little tray that has the feet in it. You'll have your embroidery foot that you'll need when you're embroidering. Pre-installed on this machine, I have the ankle and just a regular sewing foot, but you have various feet that are in here. You'll have the zipper foot. Sorry, that's not the zipper foot, that's the buttonhole foot. You'll have the zipper foot, various ones that are in there. You'll have extra bobbins and a seam ripper, and these all fit really nicely inside the accessory tray. And that just slides right on. With the Vesta, you will have the foot pedal to control the sewing. You will not have a foot pedal for the Flare because you won't be doing sewing. And the really great thing about this machine is both machines come with a 5x7 and a 6x10 hoop. So the 6x10 hoop is much bigger and allows you to do larger projects. And then obviously it comes with the power cord. So next we'll talk about sewing with the machine. So I'm going to show you how to power up the machine. I want you to think about whether you're going into sewing mode or embroidery mode. It's best to power off the machine when you attach the embroidery arm or you detach the embroidery arm. So we're starting in an off position. I have the accessories arm installed, and then on the side of the machine you can see we have where the power cord attaches. We have the power button. This is where your foot control plugs in if you have it. The USB for importing your embroidery files, and then you'll have the hand wheel. But when we go to turn this on, we're just going to flip the switch to on. And you'll see when the machine turns on, there's a welcome screen, and it's smart enough to know that it's in sewing only mode. So two important parts that you need for any project, whether it's sewing or embroidery, is you need the top thread and you need bobbin thread. So what I'm going to do is show you how to wind the bobbin on these machines. So first you lift the lid on this. You're going to load your thread onto the thread spool. You typically put a spool cap just to keep it from getting away. There are numbered instructions on the machine. So step one is to go around this arm and go down and under the metal piece here. And then when we're winding a bobbin, we're going to come over here and we're going to go to step 3, and you're going to wind the thread behind this little finger and down under the disc. And when you pull on it, you should feel a little bit of tension. And then again, your machine comes with multiple class 15 bobbins. So what I like to do is I like to thread the thread through a hole on the bottom and kind of hold on the bottom, and I stick it on the spool post, the bobbin post, and what that does is that pinches it on. And I like to do this just so that the thread doesn't lock on the bobbin and pull your embroidery project out. The other thing that's really important is to make sure that the thread here is tight. If you've got extra slack here, it'll get caught up around here when it spins it. So you can just pull it a little bit here, make sure it's nice and taut but still has the tension there. Once you have that there, you close this together, and then you'll see that the indicator will change to almost like an orange. You have to remove the foot control to wind the bobbin. So I removed the foot control to wind the bobbin, but you could leave the foot control on and actually use the foot control to wind the bobbin. I'm just in the habit of using the button. When you're in embroidery mode, you won't have the foot controller at all attached, so you get in the habit of using that way. So just to keep an eye to make sure your thread is staying within the bobbin and it's not getting wound around the post. Make sure it's doing a nice pattern where it's going up and down. When it's done winding, it'll make like a little hesitation mode and you'll need to hit stop. So see how it's kind of hesitating with what it's doing. So I'm gonna go ahead and hit stop. We're gonna trim our thread, disengage the locking mechanism. I'm gonna trim the extra little bottom at the end, and you've got a perfectly wound bobbin. The only other thing I want people to check, especially with embroidery, because tension, the way the bobbin is wound is very important, is you just kind of put your fingernail in here and make sure that the threads aren't like super loose. If you go in here and the threads are just falling apart, it hasn't been wound properly, and it needs to be, make sure it's really tight around this disc here at the top. All right, now we're going to finish threading the machine. So I'm just gonna go ahead and pull the thread out from where we did the bobbin. And again, we're gonna go through the steps. We're gonna go step 1, we're gonna go around the plastic arm, down, up, around the metal channel. Step 2 is to go up and around. Step 3 is to go down and under. And I like to hold the thread on the right hand side. Step 4, you go around and down. Step 5, you go down. Step 6, there's a little clamp right here above the needle bar. So the trick I have for this is if you put your presser foot down, you should actually feel a little tension in the thread, and it actually helps hold it so you can click it over there. To get into the 6th position, you definitely want to make sure it clicks over there. Then you're going to go through this metal channel and then up over the number 7. Turn the machine a little bit for you. Number 8 is going to be this cutter. So you just bring it through and you're going to cut it. You're going to leave the little dangly there. And then step 9 is to push this down to thread your machine. As easy as that. So I'm going to bring the presser foot back up because now we need to load the bobbin. So there's a little rectangle over here. You stick your finger in, you pull it over, and you'll see the lid hinges up. I'm going to pull out the old bobbin. So this is the bobbin we just wound. And there's a picture on here that shows you how it's supposed to be. So when you're holding the bobbin, it's supposed to come off the left-hand side. And you lay it in there. And you're going to go around the little plastic finger, around the channel. I want you to make sure you see this rotating so you get into the tension discs. And then you pull it over and it cuts off. And then you replace the lid. And your machine is threaded. All right, I'm going to talk to you about the sewing features on the Vesta. So first I'm going to go through the buttons. A lot of the buttons are going to be commonly used with the embroidery. So we'll discuss that when we get to that point. You have the start and stop button, which is something you can use to stitch. If you don't want to use the foot control, you can control it with the start stop button. As we saw earlier, we also use this button to start and stop the bobbin winding. This is your reverse stitch. This is a reinforcement stitch. We'll talk about that here in a bit. This button does the needle up and down. So when you press it, the needle goes up and down. This is a thread trim. It'll cut your thread. This button will have the presser foot lift and lower, and this will be the speed control of your sewing. So if you're new to sewing, you may want to turn this down. Once you become much better at sewing, you can turn this up and get through your projects much faster. We'll just put it in the middle of the road. The Vesta and the Flare have this wonderful touch screen system, full color. In here, again, we're in the sewing mode, so you can see the sewing options we have here. So right now, we've defaults to the 1-03 stitch, which is a straight stitch where the needle's in the center position. The same stitch, if you want to do it to the left position, is 101. If you can see, the needle moves back and forth when you go between the two. If you want to stitch on the right hand side, there is a mirroring feature. So you click this extra option on the right and you see the triangles, that mirrors it, so you'll stitch on the right hand side. We'll just go back to the center stitch. And if you look close enough, you'll see 1-03 and 1-04 look like the same stitch. They're both stitching straight in the center, but the first one has 2 bars and the other one has a dot. And so this is whether or not you want to do the 3 stitches to lock in the beginning of the seam, or whether you just want to do a reinforcement stitch right at the beginning. So those are options you have. You'll also see there's 6 pages of stitches. Just to show you, this has many different features that you can use, many different stitch selections that you can have. In order to access those, you'll just need to hit the right and left arrows to go between all of those stitches. Each one of those you can go into and customize as you'd like. Also, to get into, these are the utility stitches. If you want to go into more of the decorative stitches, there's a button down here where you can get into the more fun decorative stitches or even the lettering stitches. The lettering stitches allow you to customize your quilts and put a little message at the bottom with some wording. It's really neat to do. So I'm just going to pick a stitch and we'll do some test sewing with it. A couple of the buttons at the bottom I want to show you. There's the button that basically says when you're in the middle of stitching whether you want to leave the needle up or the needle down. My preference when I'm quilting and I'm piecing multiple pieces, that when it stops I want to make sure the needle stays down so that way my fabric doesn't shift. So I like to put that in there. We also have the button to be able to automatically reinforce the stitch when you start stitching. So you don't have to remember to constantly when you start to reinforce it to do the back stitch. It'll do it automatically for you. I like that one. And then when you're at the end and you choose to hit the little circle donut button, you can have it to where it'll automatically cut when it's done with the stitch, which is really nice too. So I'll go ahead and turn that on. There's a little pocket icon here. What that's for is once you can set all this stuff, you can actually save your favorite stitches into the machine. So that way if you're using the same ones all the time, you can set these settings up, any of your stitch length or width, and have it set for you so that you can always come back to it quickly. So we're going to go through that. So I basically just have a quilt sandwich here where I have 2 pieces of fabric with batting in the middle just to play with. So I'm going to load it under the machine and I'm going to use the button to lower the presser foot. And then I'm going to go ahead and use the foot control. And we'll start stitching. Now remember I have it to where it'll automatically do the back stitch for us. So there's kind of started the stitch for us. I'm going to speed this up a little. It's kind of slow. And it keeps going. Now if I stop, you'll see how it left the needle in the fabric so that I don't have to worry about this shifting much. So I'll go ahead and continue on for a little bit here. And the stitch takes a while, so but let's say I'm done with my seam. I'm going to go ahead and hit this donut button, we like to call it. It's going to do a back stitch and it did a thread trim there. So now when we're done I can pull it away and you can see the stitch that we have here. So it's super easy to get in here and do any kind of quilting with this, any kind of sewing that you'd like to do. Let's see here. We also, I'll go ahead and cancel what we have currently. One of the neat features, so we showed you that it recommends the J button when we were doing regular stitching, but let's say we pick a buttonhole foot, you can see that it's telling you to change to the A foot. So this machine is smart enough to kind of recommend to tell you which feet it wants you to use. In order to change the feet, there's a button on the back of the ankle. You just push it, the foot comes off, and then you can replace it with a different foot. So I'm not going to go through all the feet with you and show you how they work. Definitely check your operator's manual on how to do it, but the fun part with these machines is definitely getting into the embroidery, but these have advanced sewing capabilities to be able to do whatever project you'd like to do. So I'm going to show you how to switch from sewing to embroidery. This is typically only done with the Vesta. I'm going to use the flare. I'm cheating a little bit just so we can combine the two things. So the first thing you want to do, like I mentioned, when you want to attach and detach the embroidery arm, you always want to turn the machine off. So we start with machine off. You're going to remove the accessories tray. You're going to attach the embroidery arm. Now if you can see, there's a little channel that may have already been closed. You want to make sure that's open so that the embroidery arm unit will fit into it. You want to slide it in and make sure it clicks, make sure it's got a nice flat surface, that you have it on a nice sturdy table. So we have that on here. At this point we can turn the machine on. And it'll give you a warning that it's going to move the embroidery unit. Okay, so we have the embroidery unit. The next thing we need to do is to change the foot out from the sewing foot to the embroidery foot. So you'll take the ankle and the foot off, and you'll attach the embroidery foot. You'll also want to change your needle from a sewing needle to embroidery needle. And the last thing that you want to do is you want to make sure that the bobbin thread you have is embroidery bobbin thread. Now with sewing, you can sew with just about any thread. With embroidery, we definitely recommend that you use a bobbin thread when you're sewing, and this helps make your projects turn out well. The only exception is if you're doing freestanding lace, then you can actually match your bobbin thread to your top thread. But I want to talk about the two types of bobbin threads that we have for the two machines. So if you're using the Vesta, which is both a sewing and embroidery machine, you need to use the 60 weight finishing touch thread. If you're using the Flare, which is an embroidery only machine, you need to use a 90 weight bobbin thread. So that's very important to know. The 90 weight has this kind of teal green color, and then the 60 weight is the white. So if you're on the Vesta, you'll use the white one. If you're on the Flare, you'll use the teal. So it's the same way to wind a bobbin, the same way to load it, same way to thread your embroidery thread. We go from there. Your Flare and Vesta come with two hoops. You have a 5x7 hoop and a 6x10 hoop. Please notice that when you're cutting your stabilizer and your fabric to use for hoops, that the hoop is actually larger than a 5x7 or a 6x10. It's just the stitchable area is 5x7 or 6x10. So we're going to work with the 5x7 hoop today. And I'm going to show you how to load stabilizer into it. So first you turn the knob in order to loosen it, and you pull the two pieces apart. Then you'll take your stabilizer that you want to put in, lay it over the bottom portion of the hoop, and you lay the top piece in, and you push it in. You straighten it as you need to. You'll tighten the screw. And when you're done, it should be kind of like a drum. Make sure it's kind of tight enough. Make sure everything it's connected on all edges and everything's in there, so it's a nice flat top surface. In this case, I am using a mesh cutaway stabilizer. There's many different types of stabilizers you can use. There's three main kinds. There's cutaway, wash away, and tear away. So cutaway, just like it sounds like, is when you're done with the project and you have the stabilizer in the back, you actually need to cut it away from your stitches. If it's tear away, it'll tear away from your stitches when it's done. And if it's wash away, you throw it in the washing machine or you run it under some water and it melts away and the stabilizer's not there anymore. There are multiple thicknesses of stabilizers, and the thicknesses will depend on the project that you are doing. So I have a little example here. So if you're using just some kind of like decorative script and it's not very thick, you won't need very thick of a stabilizer and it'll stitch out properly. If you're doing something that's very dense like this, if you're not using a thick enough stabilizer, you can see it'll pucker like it does here. So if you don't have a thicker stabilizer, you can always hoop two stabilizers to give it extra thickness for the dense stitches that you have there. I'm just going to flip it over real quick to show you a technique. When you're stitching, you want to make sure that you actually see just a little bit of bobbin thread in the middle of it. You should see the top thread coming through. It's not like regular sewing where you're not going to see it on the back. You will see the top thread, but you just want to see a little channel of the bobbin thread. That is perfectly normal because you don't ever want to see the bobbin thread on the top of your project. So that's something just to always keep an eye on. So now I'm going to actually show you how to embroider something, but real quickly I want you to look at the front of the Flare, and you can see that a lot of the buttons from the Vesta are not on this machine. So these are the buttons that you will use that are common between sewing and embroidery. So the start and the stop is how we're going to begin and end our embroidery. You have the needle up and down, you have the trim function, and the presser foot up and down. So much cleaner interface on the Flare because it's just embroidery only. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to load our hoop. So as you can see, there's a channel on the side of this, and there's a locking mechanism, so you want to make sure it's unlocked. And you're going to take your hoop and you're going to load it in that channel, and you make sure your presser foot is up so you can slide your hoop underneath. You're going to slide it in until it doesn't go anymore, and then lock it down. Then move any extra fabric out of the way. As simple as that. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to actually pick something to design. So as you can see, the startup screen when you're in embroidery mode is very different than the sewing mode. So under here, there's exclusive designs that you can pick from, and again, you can go through them. In here, there's some floral options. You can hit the back to go back. You go into kids' corners. You can pick a fish. There's tons of different designs you can go from there. If we go back, we have some more decorative stitches in here. Again, go through and play with it. Tons of options in there. You can pick an Easter bunny, anything, more fish, all kinds of really neat designs. And all these designs are set up to work with your 5x7 and 6x10 hoops. There's lots of options there. For now, I just want to show you some simple text. Here's some decorative text options that you have. If you want to do monogramming, these are great. All the different alphabets in there. We're just going to do some simple text for you today, just to keep it short and sweet. So let's pick this one. And we're just going to type in flare. Oops. So I have the capital F. If you want to go to lowercase letters, you go forward and you'll see the lowercase letters. Okay, so if I hit set, this will show you the sizing in the hoop. One of the things I want you to pay attention to up here is at the top, there's multiple hoops that are listed at the top. And so for the current design we have, it's saying, these are saying the hoops that it supports. So the two that come with it are the 5x7 and the 6x10, which are the two largest hoops. This design will also fit in a 4x4 hoop if you'd like to purchase it additionally. And there's another little tiny hoop, and I think it's like 1.5 inches by 2. It's a really tiny hoop that you can also get. But the nice thing is, as you move and rotate this design, like if I move it up, it'll actually show us that by moving it up in here that it's now positioned wrong and it no longer will support the 4x4 hoop, but it does still support the 5x7 hoop that we have here. So I'm just want to move it up to, just move it out of the way so we have some room to stitch some other stuff later. So I can move it with just using my finger and touching the screen, or I can go move and I can use the arrows from some little micro movements if you want to do perfect lining up with something. You can also go in here and size things larger and smaller if you want to. There's proportionate sizing, so you want to, if you have a face or a bunny rabbit or something like that, you don't want to like skew it and make it too tall and make it really weird looking. So you want to do the proportionate zooming. If you're okay with whatever it is getting skewed one direction or the other, so like if it's a decorative border or something, that's all right. If it's skinnier than tall, you can change those here. Because we're in the text, you can actually change the size of the lettering from large, medium, and small. So it'll change the text for you with there. You can choose to rotate this if you'd like to, depending on what you've loaded in your project. If you've loaded a shirt or a onesie or something like that, you want to make sure that it's upright, so you may want to rotate it to fit your needs. If you want to go back and change the font, you can go back into here and change the font to a different one. I'm just going to leave it where it is. You can go in, there's lots of extra stuff you can play with. I don't want to overwhelm you too much with this, but you can change each letter to be a different color. You can space out the lettering. You can make them closer, you can make them further away. All kinds of things. You can go in here and just play with a million different things. If you wanted to go in here and you wanted to audition different threads, you want to see, this is more fun when you're actually in a design, but you can actually change the colors of in here so you can see it. But ultimately it's whatever color of thread you have loaded in the machine is what's really going to stitch. So this isn't as fun of a feature to play with. So when we're done editing everything right now, I'm just going to hit edit end, and you can do any kind of last minute positioning if you want to. One of the features I would definitely like to show you is this tracing feature. What this will do is this will show you where in the hoop it's going to stitch this out. So if I hit this feature and we hit the trace here again, it's going to kind of show you a visual representation of where it's going to stitch out. So right now it's staying on this section of the hoop, which is what I want to do so that I can stitch something down here later. So everything looks good to me, and we're going to hit embroidery. So now it's ready to embroider. It can tell you that it's going to be 1,672 stitches. It's going to take approximately 3 minutes to stitch out. There's just one color stop because I have it all the same color. And I'm going to finish threading my machine here. So in order to start this, all you have to do is put the presser foot down, and you'll see the indicator turn to green, and then you start it. And when it's done, it'll tell you it's finished embroidering. You can just hit OK. You just need to unlock the frame, pull the frame out. See, it does most of the trimming for you. We just have one little thread here. And we have it finished. It looks great on the front and the back. Super easy like that. So now we're going to go back and we're going to stitch something different. So to get out of here, we're just going to go back. And at some point, it's going to ask us if we want to cancel the current pattern. Yeah, we're done with it, so we're going to go back. I'm going to go into the frames and just pick something different here. So I'll pick the heart. Let's pick something that's multicolored here. I'm going to set it. I'm going to move it down. I'm not going to do anything fancy. If you wanted, you can go in here and so right now I'm just adding one element at a time. You can always go in and add a monogram character and add that in and resize it down. I mean, you could add as many elements as you want into this. See here, we'll make this one bigger. Kind of do things like that, but just for the simplicity of this video, I'm not going to do all that. So let me resize this down. But you can add whatever you want into it, and then the order that you add the designs into here is going to be the stitch out order, but I'll show you as we continue on here how to get through those. So I'm done editing. Oops. Remember I said to watch the icons to know which frame. It was telling me to go to the larger frame, but I know I don't need the larger frame. So I'm going to go into embroidery. And the one thing you'll notice with this design, because it's two colors now, that you'll actually see there's two color stops. So at first it's going to stitch black and then it's going to stitch red. Now again, you don't have to choose black and red. You can choose whatever you want, but this gives you a little visual of what it's doing. This is the completed project on the left hand side, and on the right hand side it's showing you what the current color stop is. So the black is doing just kind of this outline of the heart, and then if I were to go forward to the next one, the red is going to be like these little dots that are in there. So I'm going to go back to here to kind of show you out. The other elements I want to show you with this, again, it's recommending that you use the embroidery foot, that we're using a single needle. This is telling us the number of stitches, we mentioned that last time, the total stitch time, and it's going to tell us which color stop we're on, whether we're on 1 or 2. So if you ever want to go back and restitch something, you can go into this area here where it says the needle plus minus. When I hit on that, you can either go back to a previous color stop or a forward color stop, or you can just go back by a couple steps, and I'll kind of show you that here too. But in the meantime, I'm going to start at the beginning. I'm just going to use the same color thread. And in order to start this, you just need to make sure it's locked down. Press our foot's down, and then we hit start. So generally speaking, everything stitches out and there's typically not any issues at all, but life happens, things happen. You run out of bobbin thread, you run out of top thread, sometimes your thread at the top gets caught, sometimes there's a little notch in your spool of thread, it gets caught in there. There's times when things happen. If anything, I want you to trust your gut too. If anything sounds weird, anything's not working normal, I want you to hit the stop button. So at this point, let's say something's happened. It may come up to you and says that it's out of bobbin thread. The machine is very intelligent and it'll detect things. It says, you know, check your top thread. We've detected that you broke the top thread. So when it comes up with an error, you need to clear it and it stops. What you always need to do is, unless you're hearing some kind of mechanical issue, but the first thing you're going to want to do is you're going to want to cut the thread. So if you ran out of bobbin thread, you want to cut the top thread. If you had an issue with the top thread, you want to cut the bobbin thread. So that's the way everything's free and clear. At this point, if you need to change the bobbin, you can just pull the hoop out, pop out your bobbin, load in a new one, reload your frame. If you're having an issue with the threading on the top, you can rethread. Or even, let's say you stitch this out and you're like, I really don't like the yellow, I want to go back and do it black. What you can do is change your thread color, and then we just need to adjust where we're at. So in the case of where we've just broken the bobbin thread or we had a top thread, we can look here and go, maybe the last 10 or 20 stitches didn't happen right. So on the screen, you can see there's a green crosshairs, which is telling you where it is. So let's say this whole top arc of the heart didn't get completed. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit -10 until I'm back to where I want it to restart from. Again, You can use -1, -10, -100, depending on how far back you need to go. In the case if you want to stitch a whole new color, you go all the way back to the beginning of the color stop with the plus/minus on the thread spool. Once you're where you want to be, then you just press your foot down and start again, and it'll go right over top. For the most part, you can go back and stitch right over top of existing threads, and it looks great. The only caution I'll give you is kind of like if you paint a wall red and you go back later and try to paint it white, it's not going to cover up very well. So the same thing, if you have a really dark thread and you want to try to go back over it with the white thread, you'll see the other thread through, but most of the time it works just fine. But anytime you run into issues, that's how you kind of navigate forward and back. If for whatever reason it didn't stitch out properly, you can always go back to your design and stitch it again. Again, now it's at the next thing with the color stop, so you can continue on with your design. There's tons of designs on your embroidery machine that you can play with, but there's also designs that you can purchase elsewhere. You can come into the store, we have Kimberbell and OESD designs that you can stitch from. There's also many designs that you can purchase online. So the question is, how do you get from those to your machine? So what you do on your home computer, or if the designs come with a USB, you'll need to plug in the USB. So if anything you've purchased online, you'll need to transfer to USB, and then you'll plug the USB in. And on the home screen, there'll be this little pocket button. When you hit the pocket button, you have the choice to import files from the actual machine that you saved or the USB. Right now, we'll go ahead and do USB. And it's showing me the folders and the files that I have actually on the machine. When you select a design, it'll actually tell you at the top. It'll kind of give you a little bit of a preview. You can see a thumbnail what the picture is. It'll tell you the size of it, that this is 4 1/4 by 7, and it'll actually show you which hoops that design supports. If you have a design in here that is too large for the hoops for your machine, it'll actually gray out that design and won't let you pick it. So I'm going to go ahead and select that one, and then once you hit set, it'll be everything like you saw with the designs that are on the machine. So in this case, this has some kind of default coloring that I don't think you'd really stitch it out. So if you'd like to try to see the auditioning feature, I'll show you that here too. So we're going to click that, and I'm not going to have the stems of my flower being blue. So I'm going to go forward, and I'm going to pick a light green, and then I'm going to advance to the next color stop, and this is going to be the leaves, and so I want those to be like a dark green. And then the next color stop would be the little flowers themselves, so I'll make them pink. And the yellow for the center is perfectly fine. So this is a way of kind of auditioning the colors that you have on here. Again, this isn't really changing anything in the way it's stitching. It's just helping you that once you have gone to the design, that when it tells you to change the colors, it may help you. You can do that. So now that we've done all this, and we've made these customizations, or let's say I want to stitch this out multiple times on a couple different towels. So I'd like to save it to the machine. So there's a little pocket here with an arrow going into the pocket. When we click on that, it's going to say, do we want to save the design to the machine, to the USB, or whether we want to wirelessly send it. I'll show you that a little bit later, but we're going to go ahead and save it to the machine. And if I back all the way out, I just want to show you. So if I wanted to import that from the machine, we can unplug the USB just to know that's not part of the picture at all. And then we're going to go to the machine, and then these are the designs that are saved on the machine. And as you can see, we have the wildflower that's there. So that's a real easy way to kind of save what you have. One of my favorite features of the Flare and Vesta is the ability to send embroidery files through Wi-Fi to the machine. So you don't have to mess with a USB stick or trying to remember your USB stick. So in order to do that, what you need to do is go to babylock.com, and you'll search for the Design Database Transfer tool. Once you find that entry, you click on the link. And about halfway down on the page, you'll see there's this download URL. Once you hit that, the hyperlink, you click on that, and that's how you download and install the Design Database Transfer tool. I'll let you do that on your own, but once it's installed, it'll have this little icon that's a paper with an arrow. And then when you click on that, you can see that it loads the tool. It'll default to a directory that it installs for you, but I've gone ahead and selected one of our dime designs that we have here. And you'll see that one of the greatest features of this is that you can actually see a thumbnail picture of your designs. If you've ever loaded the PES files on your computer, it has no idea how to read those. So this is a great way to actually see your designs. So on here, in order to add your machine, there's a couple steps you want to do. So I'm going to switch back to the embroidery machine, and I'm going to go into the settings, and there is a page for your LAN connection. So you'll need to make sure that it's enabled and you're selected into a Wi-Fi. And then also, if you go to the machine name settings, I've changed the machine name to something that's logical to me. And then on your computer, you will also change to the same Wi-Fi. And in order to add the machine, you go in here, the top bar, and there's a network machine settings. I'm going to go ahead and remove this one and add it again just to show you. And you'll see when I hit add, you can see the flare machine that we have here on the network. We're going to go ahead and hit add. And once you'll do that, you'll see at the bottom, you'll see our flare is available to send files to. So I'm going to go to, on the machine, then go to the pocket, and we're going to do the Wi-Fi. This is how we're going to import files. So I just want to kind of clear these out that we did before here as a little sample. All right, so now we're starting with nothing on the machine. So what I want to do is I want to take this cute little penguin and I want to send it to my embroidery machine. So once you select the penguin, you're going to hit the down arrow, and it's going to basically put this in the queue. At this point, it hasn't sent it to the machine yet. So you can pick from multiple different files to send it once. So let's say we do the little feet too. So you're going to pick what you want from it, and then we're going to hit this button that says send it to the machine. So once we do that and you watch over on the machine, you'll see that the designs have appeared. It's really pretty cool. It's just that simple. One thing I want to warn you though is that these designs are here, but as soon as you turn off the machine and turn it back on, these designs will be gone. So if this is something that you want to stitch later, you want to make sure you hit the pocket with the arrow and save it to your machine so that you can grab it later. But if you're ready to stitch that design now, we'll go ahead and pick the design we want to stitch, hit set. You can size it and do everything you want to do, and go ahead and embroider it, and you can see everything's on there. First step is to do the little snowflakes. So it can't get any easier than that, sending files back and forth between your computer and your embroidery machine. So that summarizes all the features and functions of the Flare and the Vesta. They really are wonderful machines, and you can make lots of projects with them. We hope that you have a lot of fun stitching with them. Please reach out to myersewing.com. We have classes and events that are out there where you can learn extra techniques and projects. We've got project kits. You can learn how to do embroidery kit or zippered pockets in the hoop. There's lots of things you can do. We'd love to teach you more about the projects you can make with your Flare or Vesta. Again, we're here with you every stitch of the way. Always reach out if you have any questions, but happy stitching.